President-elect Donald J. Trump.
We did stave off what may have been the darkest chapter in American history. It was a total roller coaster. Everyone saw Trump was up big, but there was a big open question about, are they going to let Trump win? And I do really believe that it was, in the end, too big to rig.
The battle is won, but the war has just begun, and people need to really understand that. You're gonna have to fight for every single inch of this.
You should pop champagne, celebrate, you earned it, but it's not the title fight. Now you've qualified to fight for the title, and the glory that comes from actually having that real-world impact.
$2 trillion worth of government jobs and bureaucracy doesn't go quietly into the night. What do you expect the pushback to be?
You're going to see attempts to bribe and poach and extort members of the Trump administration. In addition, the New York Times published last week that there were emergency meetings at the Pentagon about how to Trump-proof the agency. They ordered an industrial shredder the day of the election, which is big enough to basically mash up servers. I mean, you have a $35 trillion black hole in the Pentagon budget. There's a lot to be cleaned up.
Mike, you really are unique in your intellectual property, and I just want to say thank you again for being a part of our film at the Myrtle Beach Film Festival. And you were the first person, Mike, that explained to me what actually happened.
It's a fantastic film. We will not be silenced. It's really incredibly unique. I learned a lot from watching the film, not just artistically, but even the personal struggle as you are trying to build and preserve your media channel, cultural movement, as you're sort of taking the slings and arrows of it all. It's a great film, highly recommend, and I hope you do a sequel.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mike Benz, the technology lawyer, free speech advocate, and author. You are the executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online, the free speech watchdog dedicated to restoring the promise of a free and open internet. You previously spent time as a speechwriter and technology advisor in the first Trump administration before moving on to the State Department. You have been pivotal in exposing the censorship industrial complex and what you refer to as the blob, a deep state web of government-led agencies that are routinely manipulating media organizations, NGOs, and even universities. You have said the blob has consistently influenced the course of events in foreign countries while domestically censoring freedom of speech and the free exchange of ideas online. You believe that now President Trump must choose his staff wisely or risk sabotage attempts from within his own administration, while the GOP must not squander this extraordinary mandate to make positive, long-term changes. Mike, welcome back to London Real.
That was amazing. I think our work is done here. I think we've covered it. Yes. No, thanks. It's great to be back.
Mike, great to have you here. Last time I saw you, I think, was in Myrtle Beach when our film was premiering, and it was great to have you out there. Look, I just want to get your take on the events, maybe the 2 weeks leading up to the election, how you were feeling. I think we were all pretty tense. The day itself, obviously the win, and how you've been feeling since. Can you walk me through that kind of, what probably maybe the most emotional period of your life? I don't know. What was it like for you?
That's absolutely right. I mean, it was a total roller coaster. Everyone saw the numbers. Everyone saw Trump was up big. But there was a big open question about whether or not, and I think this was not alone to America. I think many people all around the world were wondering, are they going to let Trump win? And I think the size of the victory, I do really believe that it was, in the end, too big to rig. We are still seeing, there are still votes being counted in Pennsylvania and in California. And there's now rumblings that they have clawed back the popular vote victory. This is one of these dynamics here in the U.S., which is that we have this electoral college system, which reflects the various states' sort of aggregate input. It's sort of rounded to give smaller states a larger say so that they don't get isolated by these big sort of dense metropolitan areas. And one of the arguments that was made in 2020 by high-level officials from the blob was that even if Trump were to win the election on election day, if he were to lose the popular vote, that they could organize street riots and protests and do a sort of color revolution style pro-democracy shutdown of the country, shut down the highways, block the federal buildings, invade the police precincts, all in the name of mostly peaceful protests because the people's will is not being represented by the popular vote. That was planned to be sort of carried out in tandem with a legal attack on the electoral college system itself. We saw an attempt to sort of gerrymander that in 2024. In the weeks leading up to the election, there was a flurry of New York Times, Washington Post articles. Even the dean of Berkeley Law School came out and said that the Constitution is a threat to democracy, that it needs to be thrown in a paper shredder or some sort of incinerator because this electoral college allows Trump to win and Trump is a threat to democracy. But then lo and behold, on election day, Trump not only wins a 300 point electoral college blowout, he also wins the popular vote by 5 million votes. So what are the protester signs going to say? It's I think that right now they are regrouping, but I think that the avenue to block Trump from inauguration that I was concerned about has been mostly alleviated by just the sheer too big to win, too big to rig size of the win.
Yeah, I spoke to Jim Rickards about some of the games they could play in early January, labeling him as the insurrectionist and potentially, not making valid some of these electoral votes, and obviously the pushback. And then there is some action going on in Pennsylvania right now. I know they're still contesting, I think, a Senate seat, and they're talking about how to qualify certain mail-in votes and whether they're disqualified if they're not dated. And it still seems like some fun and games are going on out there. Is that something we should still be concerned about?
Well, you still have to be concerned about it because it still influences what ends up happening in the House and the Senate. The fact is their fallback plan, shy of something tragic happening to the president, is to effectively neuter his administration through having a inside resistance through the Senate, through the House, through the courts, and through outside media and civil society pressure. And the more that our Congress is stacked in favor of President Trump, the harder it's going to be to block the Trump agenda. And so they're fighting for every House seat, they're fighting for every Senate seat. And that's how you're seeing this drag on for so long. As you mentioned, in Bucks County, they've self-declared that they're counting illegal votes. It's just unbelievable. But the fact is because of the size of the blowout, they're desperate to pad as much of their own cronies in there as possible by hook or by crook.
It's interesting. Like a week before the election, I was talking to people, and we had a lot of people on the show. I had Rudy Giuliani here in the studio about a month before, and he was the first guy that had ever gone into detail with me about the interference. And I was like, wow, I've never actually heard this talked about because it's been kept out of mainstream for so long. But here's a guy who is, a really good attorney, was the attorney general in New York, who was giving me the details. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. And then with everything that was going on with Elon and this government efficiency department and what Vivek was talking about, I was reminded of what you were talking about in the blob. And I just thought, you know what, $1 trillion or $2 trillion worth of military industrial worth of government jobs and bureaucracy doesn't go quietly into the night. And so whether you're a conspiracy theorist or not, you've got an inertia that doesn't want to move. And so if you've got someone coming in that's going to try to move that thing, it's going to resist and it's going to find some way, and you don't even have to be a conspiracy theorist, it just doesn't want to go away. And so I thought to myself, there's no way they can allow this man in to do these things without a massive amount of pushback. And I'm just curious what you think about that. I guess we're seeing it starting to happen now, but this thing isn't going to want to go away just from pure entropy itself. And so how do you see that pushback coming? We now see that Vivek and Elon are going hard on this Department of Government Efficiency. The rhetoric from Vivek has been crazy, as in, we're going in to slash and burn, and that's the only way to get rid of this thing. What do you expect the pushback to be?
Well, you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist. You can simply read the New York Times and be a true believer in the trust and integrity of the mainstream media, because the New York Times published last week that there were emergency meetings at the Pentagon about how to Trump-proof the agency against the commander-in-chief. So we know that these conversations are happening. In fact, there's a sort of somewhat notorious, famous tweet going around right now. Someone found the actual procurements at the Pentagon. They ordered an industrial shredder the day of the election, which is big enough to basically mash up servers. I mean, you have a $35 trillion black hole in the Pentagon budget. That's larger than the annual GDP of the entire country, just the size of the accounting black hole in the Pentagon's budget. So there's a lot to be cleaned up, but I think what you're going to see from their side, in addition to attempts to use lawfare, I think you're going to see state prosecutors play a highly active role in this administration, trying to use state level prosecutions where there's no ability to have federal pardons or federal immunity on various things. I think you're going to see attempts to bribe and poach and extort members of the Trump administration to pivot them closer to the blob. You're seeing this today. Matt Gaetz, the Justice Department selection nominee from the Trump administration, there was an anonymous hack of his electronics that were then given to the New York Times, and they're trying to snowball this into some sort of sex trafficking ethics probe. But, there's only two ways to be a hacker in this country. You work for the CIA, the NSA, or the FBI, or you're a felon. That's the only two ways that you can be a hacker in this country. And the fact is someone just today hacked Gates's personal electronics and then gave it to the New York Times, who's publishing its contents. You are going to see that in an attempt to shut up, to silence, to threaten either directly or through back channel conversations that you don't want to go there. You have a beautiful thing going, simply go along to get along, obstruct from the inside. You're going to see this at the DOJ level. You're going to see this at the State Department level. You're going to see this at the DOD level, USAID, the whole shebang, DHS, FBI. Now, Trump has done, I think, a remarkable job so far in terms of his cabinet pick selections in order to try to put people in who are tough enough and loyal enough to resist the extortion and blackmail attempts. I do not think Matt Gaetz is going to be deterred by this. I think it is only going to make him angry. But there are others I'm not so sure about. The fact is everyone on the MAGA Trump side was pulling for Rick Scott to be the Senate Majority Leader, but in a sort of midnight emergency meeting pulled off by Senate Republicans, they put John Thune in as the Senate Majority Leader. Well, the Senate Majority Leader has an unbelievable amount of power over the Senate. He's the person who gets to determine all of the committee assignments, which is how you get power in the Senate. So everyone is going to need to suck up, in some sense, to John Thune if they want a healthy Senate career on the Republican side. John Thune is a guy who has made his career with faithful fidelity to the blob. It's also the Senate who determines impeachments, who has the power of the filibuster in order to stall things. It's, and that impeachment is not just of the president. There are rumblings that this Senate majority, a pretty wide Republican majority currently, may not approve the president's own cabinet picks, including Matt Gaetz. I think it was just published that there were 9 Republican members of the Senate that are considering not appointing several Trump nominees, such as Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz, and all 9 of those voted to appoint the Democrat Merrick Garland, who was the single most corrupt attorney general in the history of the United States. Bar none, nobody else even comes close. The damage done to the credibility of the American justice system. We violated a 250-year pact around not prosecuting your political opponents, and they did it over total BS, and everyone knew it. They even worked at the state level. The Justice Department sent their number 3 directly to the demotion to the New York District Attorney's Office just to be able to mind parasite the prosecutors at the state level to coordinate at the federal level. This is the sort of thing we put sanctions on foreign countries for doing. And we made it the home court philosophy of this Justice Department. And it was totally greenlit by the Senate. There was no impeachment of Merrick Garland. He shouldn't have been approved on day one. Anyone who knows his track record, would have seen the parable of the frog and the snake, as Trump once told it. But the fact is they may not allow the appointment of pro-Trump candidates within the cabinet, and then they may impeach them any step of the way. So there's going to be this very close collaboration between the blob side of the Republican Party here in the U.S. and the out-of-power Democrat Party. And that coalition may indeed prove stronger than the MAGA coalition.
So the battle is won, but the war has just begun, and people need to really understand that, because it sounds like there's a lot of euphoria out there. Everyone thinks, the next 4 years, we're going to have everything that we desired and wanted. But that's by no means what's going to happen. You're going to have to fight for every single inch of this.
The analogy that I give is we just won the title contender fight. So you should pop champagne, you should have a good time, have a night out, celebrate. You earned it. But it's not the title fight. Now you've qualified to fight for the title. Now you've qualified to actually, have the change and the legacy and the glory that comes from actually having that kind of real world impact. But so I think there is a necessary celebration. The fact is, we did stave off what may have been the darkest chapter in American history after the chapter we're now emerging from. Another 4 years of this may have permanently stained not just the reputation, but the standing of the United States all over the world. It could have tanked our economy. It could have permanently changed the fabric of this country in terms of our trust in institutions, in terms of the functionality of our institutions. The fact is almost every major agency in the federal government broke down. We lost ground internationally. We lost ground economically. Half of our country has had no trust in our election systems, in our Justice Department. It has become a badge of honor for half of the United States to be a felon, to be a criminal, to be indicted by this Justice Department or by some Soros prosecutor in some jurisdiction somewhere. Because if you're not being hunted by these totally corrupt justice officials, are you really threatening to make change in the world? And so that's how bad things have gotten. They tried this whole line, you're voting for a convicted felon. And I think half of this country, more than half of this country, said, yeah, because that's how you really know that you're on the side of good, that you're on the side of light. It's the same argument you guys told us about Nelson Mandela. and how many other freedom fighters that were prosecuted by corrupt justice departments to take them out of politics. Well, everything you've taught us since childhood about what it means to truly stand for something. Martin Luther King was prosecuted. Gandhi was prosecuted. Mandela was prosecuted. Okay, well, you just did that to Trump.
Yeah, I was in California, Mike, in August, and speaking to a couple family members, and they were parroting back to me front page of the New York Times, and I was just shocked, because I think usually I'm in circles hanging out with people like you and Rudy, and I had Navarro on, and all these people that literally have taken massive hits for standing up for what they believe in. We've taken ours, and thanks to you, I know where those came from. I used to think it was YouTube persecuting me, and now I realize it was much higher up the food chain. And it was shocking to me to hear these people parrot back these things. He's a rapist, he's a this, is that. And funny enough, yesterday I thought about Mandela, and I did at the time, I didn't, but I would have been like, oh yeah, so Mandela spent 27 years in a prison. Was he guilty of those crimes? And of course, most people would say, well, of course not. He was obviously persecuted because of this and that. And yet, because censorship works, because the media gets inside people's heads, it's a very effective tool. And it caused most of the US to think this was a 50-50 race when it never was. When you look at that amount of misinformation that we got from the polls and the media coming up right to the end, what are your comments on that? I mean, do you look at people and say, you clearly can't trust these sources because they couldn't even tell you within, a margin of error who the president could have been? Or what do you say to people based on what the election results were?
Well, the fact is the betting markets were crystal clear from moment one, and those tend to be a far more honest indicator of sentiment in terms of how institutional money is moving, in terms of how highly informed or high net worth individuals are putting their money. It's almost like a Pelosi tracker or a Soros investment portfolio type thing. I think that there's no skin in the game for the independent pollsters. They're hired mercenaries. Half of them are affiliated with a campaign when they put it out. And so the fact that there was Polymarket and Kalshi and these other very vigorous betting markets, ironically, just last week, the Justice Department raided the home of the Polymarket CEO, seizing the electronics, seizing the phone, the home computer. When Polymarket was such a big signal for Trump, it's like there's no end to the vindictiveness of the Merrick Garland torture campaign. And I just have to add this one thing as another reason why, even though we have not won the war, that we should still celebrate the battle, is because, Brian, imagine right now if Merrick Garland was going to be running the U.S. Justice Department for the next 4 years, and Donald Trump, facing 91 felony indictments, had to spend the rest of his life in Rikers prison, rotting away with the whole world watching one of the most popular presidents in U.S. history die in a prison cell over what? People can't even remember half of the charges. I mean, do you even remember what he was indicted for in New York? Does anyone? Do you think if you were to ask right now what he would be sitting in a Rikers prison cell, rotting away as the rest of world politics plays out, as the Ukraine war plays out, as the Middle East, and meanwhile, the 45th president of the United States is in solitary confinement and nobody can even remember the crime? That's what we very narrowly avoided in this country. So it's not just the opportunity to make change and to alter the course of U.S. history for the good. It's the fact that our country was very, very close to death.
Yeah, I felt that. I mean, I've never been so anxious. I've never been so emotionally invested. And I just could not imagine a future, Mike, where the status quo remained. I just couldn't. And it was, and I thought about it, even from Trump's perspective. And, this is a guy who had no choice but to win, although he wasn't playing it like that. But I agree, like he would have been, and so many other people would have been in prison for the rest of their lives. And I still had to pinch myself that it actually happened because it felt too good to be true. It felt like one of those movies where the good guys win in the end, and you're like, wow, is this actually going to happen? And it's a great thing, and I'm glad we celebrated it. I felt really good for many days, and that doesn't happen very often. But now I see the pushback, and I see the articles on the front page of the New York Times, Tulsi Gabbard, a favorite Russian asset. I was like, come on, I can't believe they're playing this again. Obviously Gates and the headlines, and it's just back to the same old games that still 40-50% of the American public doesn't know the game. And so I can see now the pushback, and now I can see what you said. It's still the title fight is happening. What can people do out there if they want to be aware of this, and how can they keep pushing this narrative forward? Obviously they voted, but is the best way to stay informed, to push these narratives on social, to call and write their congressmen and senators and hold these Republican members accountable? Because just because they're Republican doesn't mean they're on Team Trump. Just because Trump helped them get elected doesn't mean they're on Team Trump anymore, does it?
The best thing you can do is get a premium account subscription on X. The fact is, it's something like $8 a month. You're supporting a good cause, which is the most robust political thought leadership network ever created. And it's run by, a guy who has frankly put the whole country on his back, Elon Musk, not just with the financial support to the campaign, not just with freeing X from, again, the clutches of near total free speech death in this country, but also hit the ground running. This is someone who spent weeks in the trench warfare in Pennsylvania, who put every fiber of his being, who risked everything, who stood up to the advertisers in a way that Mark Zuckerberg, who I think actually does share very similar ideological and philosophical strains with Elon in terms of a kind of soft libertarian philosophy about the role of government and private markets. We know that Mark Zuckerberg felt incredibly pressured and coerced by the Biden administration, but did not have the chutzpah to be able to publicly challenge him for years. That is the Biden-Harris, to challenge the Biden-Harris White House. A guy who had talked about how censorship was bad in 2019, and then he got hit with an ad boycott that cost him $60 billion in market cap, and then he folded like a lawn chair. And when that happened to Elon, I vividly remember that interview that he did, the same one where he gave the double barrel middle fingers to the advertisers saying GFY. He was asked, what will you do if X goes bankrupt? What will you do if the advertisers, your approach to the advertisers saying GFY to them, what if that ends up killing X? What if that bankrupts your company? And his response to that was not, well, then we'll crawl back, we'll negotiate. It was, the world will watch. I mean, he literally, put himself up on the cross that way. And the fact is it's not for lack of threats to his personhood. You've had 11 different government agencies under the Biden administration go after him personally, go after every portfolio company. You had the Justice Department, you had the FTC, you had the FCC, you had the SEC. Every death by 1,000 paper cuts they could do to Elon, they tried. And if Kamala had won that election, do you think Merrick Garland, who was comfortable putting Trump in prison for the rest of his life, would have any qualms about running that same operation against Elon Musk? There's no shame. There's no shame to these people. It's raw political power calculus, and they would have had the ability to get away with it. And who on the world stage would have stopped them? Keir Starmer's government in UK, it would have been the front page of Fleet Street that this is, in furtherance of democracy, that they've taken down probably the biggest guardian for free speech in the history of mankind at this point, Elon Musk. So, the fact is this was a team effort. The fact is there was an institutional last minute to the rescue that came in support of making our country great again. It was Elon Musk. It was Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, who at the last minute sent a very, very powerful signal to all the other media owners that, you know what, we're actually going to renegotiate our posture about being totally supplicant to the blob. Actually, I I seem to remember we call ourselves independent media. Maybe we shouldn't issue an endorsement this year. You had the support from Bill Ackman on the activist investor side. You had the support of David Sachs and Chamath from the Silicon Valley side. You have a new web of institutional hubs at the educational level here in the U.S. through Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and what they're doing in Florida and Texas. You had the ability for citizen journalism to flourish again, which, again, I say if there's one thing that you can do, you become a journalist. You own a newspaper company, effectively, the moment you have a subscription account on X and you have the full panoply of features there. You are doing, it is not a, tax deductible, charity donation, but you are helping a good cause by capitalizing the motor engine of free speech in the world today, and you yourself become a journalist every time you hit the retweet button.
Yeah, well said. Here on that. Elon was absolutely pivotal. The fact that he just camped out in Pennsylvania and, ran his own version of optimization, he did an incredible job and really probably guaranteed those results there. What do you make of what him and Vivek are going to do with the Department of Government Efficiency? Like I said earlier, it sounds like they're intending to go in there and slash and burn, which I think is the greatest strategy ever. I'm just curious what you think they're going to do and what you think they should do.
Well, I don't know. I don't have any inside knowledge on this. I've not spoken with anyone affiliated with that about it. So I'm sort of on the outside with everyone else, just sort of speculating and hoping and dreaming and thinking about what they're going to run into and what they should do. But the way it appears to be structured is as a kind of advisory council that is able to provide a sort of independent audit for what the Office of Management and Budget can take out. The fact is there is a constant turf war within the U.S. federal government between all the different agencies. Everyone's competing for the same $3 trillion odd dollars in the federal budget every year. You have the Pentagon and DHS and FBI and DOJ and USAID and HHS and Veteran Affairs, and everyone's fighting for their slice of the pie. No one wants their side of it cut. None of the administrators of the programs want to, they almost represent their contractors and their budget in the same way that a congressman represents the constituents in his or her district, in the sense that the more you do for those stakeholders, the more you do, for example, at the U.S. Pentagon for Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin, the more likely you are, like Nikki Haley, to end up with a cushy board seat on that company after your tenure is done. And that same phenomenon is true, as we talked about last time, with that relationship between the inside of the blob with the government agencies and the outside of the blob with the banks and the multinational corporations. And so no one is going to want their little slice of the pie cut. It is going to take a heavy hand. It is going to take an intractable, immovable force to hold the line against that pushback. I can think of no man on earth who has proven more capable of holding the line in the face of pushback than Elon Musk. So the fact that he is sort of atop the food chain of Doge and assisted by Vivek, who is quite frankly a brilliant man who has succeeded, I think, in everything he has set his mind to thus far in life, but has not been tested at the government level. There's always, I think, been an open question, which is that Vivek is so talented and has been so successful in all of his other ventures and so eloquent in his sort of rhetorical diplomacy. The one open question is, what happens when pressure is applied to him? Will he make good on the promises that he's spoken about, or will he fold under pressure? Because as Mike Tyson, has sort of famously said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And you never really know someone until they've gotten back up off of the ground. And so this, I think, is a really excellent testing point for Vivek in terms of his political future, in terms of how well he executes this Doge janitorial, cleanup job of all of the waste, fraud, and abuse happening within the U.S. federal government.
Mike, let me ask you a question, and if you can answer this completely objectively, as if you're not Mike Benz, what would be the best use of Mike Benz for the next 4 years in order to make America great again? Period. Whether that's in the administration, whether that's in the Doge, whether that's as an advisor to any of these people or appointees. If you really just take a step back and thought, okay, what would be the best use of this man's talents and his knowledge and everything he knows about all these different departments, what do you think it would be?
Well, I think I'm fundamentally an independent voice. I know I'm a political appointee of the first Trump administration. I'm obviously an open supporter of Donald Trump in terms of many aspects of his agenda. But I have a North Star. I have a mission in life, which is free speech on the internet. The thing that I came of age with, the thing that is near and dear to my heart at a personal level, and that I believe is a universal principle, is the greatest gift ever given to mankind. The ability to connect to every other heartbeat on earth and communicate in a totally unfiltered, uncensored way. I think it is the beating heart of everything I was ever told as a kid, represented democracy and represented human freedom and dignity. And so that is my North Star. And I see the Trump administration as a capable instrument of helping that mission be accomplished. And whether that's on the inside or whether that's on the outside, I don't know. I believe that what I've done as an independent voice over the past, frankly, 8 years, but in particular the past 2, in being able to be a public champion of these issues is a tremendously powerful post to be able to scream this from the mountaintops in a way that allows me to be independent. There is a high likelihood that there will be friction between the best way that I see for the incoming government to handle various things around internet governance issues and what folks at the cabinet level want or desire. I can already see friction around the Secretary of State level course of action that we may encounter. I can see that potentially on the Department of Defense side, on the foreign aid side, at the DHS side. And so, there is something to being an outside independent voice that I think may allow me to more honestly provide criticism and feedback. There is also the ability to publish journalism, to be able to speak freely to other voices in the media in a way that does not tie a government administration to my every word. At the same time, I obviously have an interest in helping, at the government level every way that I can. So I remain open to the possibility later in time to be able to, have those discussions. But I'm not currently in those discussions, and we'll see what the future holds. But my North Star is something I think bigger than government, and but government is one set in that whole of society effort that needs to be conducted to win the internet back.
Yeah, look, free speech online is something obviously very near and dear to our heart. You were our movie premiere, and we've been really the victims of that for the past 4 years with Google and Alphabet and YouTube kind of dialing up their prosecution and persecution of us. Our channel was completely deplatformed, I think about 13 months ago now. And it's really hindered us getting our message out. It's hindered our business. It's really sucked, to be quite frankly. And I always tell people censorship works. It works because a lot of people meet me in the streets and ask me if I'm still doing London Real. And I laugh out loud sometimes. I'm like, I'm doing it more now than I ever was. I'm broadcasting even more. But they don't see it because it's being kept from them. I had Rudy Giuliani in the studio a month ago, and at the end of the episode, I said, Rudy, if Trump wins and asks you to come in, will you prosecute the people at Google and Alphabet? Will you put them in jail for violating our rights? And will you get my channel back? And he said, yes, I will, Brian. And maybe it was a bit of a naive question, and maybe it was a bit of a simple request and maybe a selfish request. But I'm also curious if you think something like that actually could happen, Mike, or Is that a very difficult thing to happen? You know, about a week ago, a video circulated that Trump made, I think 2 years ago, and it has him with the American flags behind him, and there's a 6-minute clip of him talking about really going after these social media platforms that have held back the truth and violated our, human rights. It turns out it was from a couple of years ago, but it was a beautiful video that made me think, wow, is he really going to go in here and clean up what's going on out there and really put people in jail for violating the law? Do you think that will happen, Mike? Do you think that could happen? I'm sure it's not that simple, but how do you think that could play out?
Well, I think prosecution at the private sector level is unlikely and in my view, a kind of dangerous precedent. I'm more concerned at the government level in terms of the infractions against our First Amendment, in terms of just the sheer malevolence of how the laundering was structured. I mean, the fact is we have money laundering laws around illicit efforts to conceal an illicit source of funds. And that is exactly how they've structured the censorship industry, to accomplish the censorship by laundering it through private sector, civil society, media groups and whatnot, knowing full well that they could not have the government in the U.S. do that directly. And so I think that going after that level is far more appropriate than going after it at the private sector level. I mean, especially with all the confessions that we've had through the Twitter files, through the Facebook files, through the YouTube files, through the Amazon files, about the sheer extent of the coercion on the tech platforms. Although, frankly, you didn't even need those, because if you were paying attention in 2017, you would have seen it all in black and white at these government meetings, these U.S. taxpayer-funded meetings, where you had effectively henchmen from the Central Intelligence Agency and the Department of Homeland Security colluding about how to permanently change the economics of the news industry in order to make sure that platforms like yours, Brian's, are not allowed to generate a profit, and that you can kill alternative news by killing the advertising revenue, by killing the ability of platforms to host them. And frankly, that threat is not going away anytime soon. I fully expect the greatest threat to free speech over the next 4 years to be shadow diplomacy between the out-of-power Democrat Party in the U.S., and not the whole party, but those associated with the blob, and same on the Republican side, in order to back channel and build robust networks with the UK, with Brazil, with Australia, with Central and Eastern Europe, with parts of Central Asia, in order to effectively encircle U.S. platforms by making it the global environment for information distribution completely inhospitable to allowing Americans to even talk to Americans. This is what the EU Digital Services Act threatens: a 6% global revenue fine for X for allowing information to spread on X that is designated disinformation, effectively by NATO. You saw a copycat law, which is being voted on this week in Australia, which is a 5% global revenue fine on X if they allow misinformation as designated by their e-safety commissioner, who, oh, by the way, was openly bragging about how she was recruited to join the CIA right out of college. And whose model legislation was written by First Draft, who's the technical implementer of the State Department's most significant censorship program. So this all started with the international roadshow that out-of-power diplomats did through back channels around the world when Trump won the first time. This is not the first time Trump won a social media election. That was 2016. And the first thing the out-of-power Hillary Clinton State Department and John Kerry State Department did, they didn't ride off into the sunset and decide to just chill out on a Martha's Vineyard beach for the next 4 years. They ran back their international roadshow, these dirty diplomats, and they used the same back channel connections they had to impose sanctions on Crimea, to impose censorship laws on Europe. And it was those European censorship laws which coerced the censorship policies in the US, like NetzDG in Germany in 2017, which is the product of effectively a State Department pressure valve on our European partners, effectively required the implementation of AI censorship superweapons, the weapons of mass deletion that we talked about last time. That was the only.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.